Welcome to Ilagan Whiteboard Friday, where we look at complex legal and compliance issues in a simple to do way. This series is brought to you by Ilagan, your partner and provider of end-to-end business services.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Ilagan Whiteboard Friday. This is Vikas from the Ilagan team, and I have with me today Mr. Naeem Jaffer. He is the president and CEO of Bitzer Mobile and also a lecturer at Haas School of Business at UC Berkeley. Let's start with, you have an idea, so we move on to the next item. We are out looking for, you have an idea, you did some validation, now you're looking for co-founder. How do you go about looking for a co-founder?
Well, it's very similar to how you look for a life partner.
I just asked my parents.
That's right. That could also work here. But the idea is to go to places when people hang out. It could be at universities, any talks being given, or also contributing to the internet discussion and forum and making it available that you're working on this idea and you're looking for other people who are interested in this.
Yeah.
And it is the hardest thing in a startup process, finding the right team members. You don't need 20. You need one or two other people who are as passionate about the idea as you are.
Yeah.
And you're going to find them through interaction and conversations.
Because I was recently in India for over 2 months, and I did interact with a lot of startup founders. And one of the things that consistently came up is in India, it's tough to find people who are willing to put up, just say, hey, I want to work for a startup because they want to work for bigger, better companies.
Yeah.
And they are looking for more how much can you pay me?
Yeah.
So can you suggest something like how would you approach something, or how do you filter through those people to get to the right?
So there's no one formula. This problem also exists in this country. Most people can't afford to work for a startup. So the idea is that you don't have to jump and start working on it. Finding a co-founder is that they're also owner of the company. Maybe they don't have 50%, maybe they have 30%, maybe they have 10%, but they're co-owner with you. So when it's your own business, you think differently.
Yeah.
And remember, maybe 1 out of 100 people you will meet will really be the right mindset to do this. So you have to meet 100. You meet 10 people and nobody seems appropriate. So you don't give up.
You can't do that while sitting at a couch.
Exactly. That's what my famous line is. You're not going to meet your co-founder between your couch and your TV. You have to get out and talk to people.
Yeah.
So idea is that it is, and usually what happens is most co-founders come because you work together in the company.
Okay.
And you sort of got to know each other.
Yeah.
And then you came together or somebody introduced you. So when you're looking for a co-founder, it's quite acceptable to go back to your professors, to your other friends, say, I'm starting this thing in the cloud area. I'm looking for somebody who really are excited about, following services on cloud, who really knows about Java and something. So by saying it, if you don't tell people you're looking for it, they're not going to automatically imagine that you're looking for it. So you have to put it out. When I'm doing that, you say, hello, how are you? My name is Naeem. By the way, I'm looking for somebody in iOS expert, if you know anybody. And 1 out of 5 or 6 times somebody will say, yeah, I can connect you with somebody knows.
Yeah, and I think it's very similar to how when you find a job. So a lot of people out there, they're looking for a job. Yeah. You have to do the same thing. Yeah. You have to go out, network, and at the same time. So talking about co-founders, one of the key issues is what kind of shares what kind of equity you want to give to your co-founder, or what kind of, if you are joining somebody, if you are a new person joining an existing team, what kind of equity can you demand? Can you talk a little bit about how do you go about that? What is the right percentage?
Yeah. So the short answer is there's no right or fixed answer. It always will depend on your relationship and time. But there are 2 or 3 guidelines to follow. One guideline is that contribution or allocation of shares should be a function of future contribution, not prior contribution.
Can you elaborate that?
So a lot of time people will say, well, we have been working together for 3 months, and now, and one guy is not willing to quit your job. These 2 are going to go forward.
Yeah.
Should this be divided 1/3, 1/3, 1/3? Well, that will not be fair because one guy is not going forward. So really, it's the future contribution where the shares are allocated. So there are 3 or 4 guiding principles. One is this one. Second thing is that in general, so in general, you want to be able to be as fair and simple. If you're taking more than a couple of hours discussing this among founders, you have other problems. So usually the thing is like one guy is going to be the CEO and other 2 guys could be CTO. So CEO has a greater responsibility of finding money. So it may be that he has 40% and other two people have 30%. It could be something like that. But typically formula I draw is that if you think about this, we want to allocate approximately something like this, a 20% pool, which will be for future employees which you will be hiring as stock option plan. About 70% will be founders, and about 10% will be reserved for consultant, boards of advisors, any temporary workers which you may hire, board members. So you typically allocate like that. It's common to start with, let's 5 million shares.
Yeah.
Or 10 million shares, then you can allocate like this. Okay. But among founders, the guidelines you have is, let's first keep it simple. The second thing is, it's not unreasonable could be equal, or could be some kind of a thing based on contribution, especially looking at future contribution. Who's going to play what role going forward? Another key, yeah.
So is any particular role better? Does it mean engineering is better than marketing? So what do you mean by what role are they going to play?
So it's like CEO.
Okay.
One guy is going to be the CEO, so his main job is what? To raise money.
Yeah.
As compared to one guy's job is to build the product. Depending on the relationship with the founders, it could be equal. Okay. Equal is the simplest.
Yeah.
The 2 founders, 3 founders divide this bucket equal and leave some for other people to have a
So how do you know? Sometimes some people say, hey, I'm bringing much more value to the company than you are, or I'm bringing much more because I have so much more experience or expertise.
Yeah.
Are they valid arguments, or?
They're not terribly valid. At the end of the day, there's no formula. But that's why I said the first point is the future contribution, not okay. It's the future contribution which matters. So yeah, you bring a lot of value, but what will you do for the company going forward?
Okay, so that's very key.
Yeah, that's very key. And again, it may some people recognize, look, this guy is bringing a patent and a lot of things, and we are young people, he's the guy with experience, and he gets 40%, we get 30%. Okay, that's fine.
So now, there are a lot of times, there are small companies out there which has 2 founder, 3 founder, they have been running the company for 1 or 2 years, and they want to bring in another co-founder at a later stage of time. At that point, how do you go about dividing? Because the company might be making some revenue, they may have some products already, they may not have a product. So how do you go about deciding?
Well, first of all, you will not necessarily call them co-founders at the time because company has been founded.
Okay.
They're a strategic employee or a key employee. And then basically they get allocated from this employee pool. So question is how much? Well, it depends on the role. In Silicon Valley, it's typical when you bring in a CEO after founders have taken the company to some stage.
Okay.
For a CEO to get anywhere between 6 and 12% effectively. So then you issue just more shares. You don't sell your shares to them.
Yeah.
You issue more shares, everybody gets diluted a little bit.
Okay.
But the key point before we do that is we should talk about is vesting.
Okay.
So even for founders who have started a company together, it's appropriate to demand that your shares vest over a 4-year period. Reason for that is because suppose you started a company, one guy had 2 million shares, second guy has 2 million shares. And 6 months later, he falls in love with a girl from Brazil and disappears. Does he still have 50% of the company? He shouldn't.
Yeah.
So there should be clauses when this is contingent on you working full time and be totally available for this company. If not, then your stock will stop vesting. So vesting is a 2-year vesting means 1/48 of the number of shares being vested every month.
Yes, sir. Okay. So have a cliff, maybe 1-year cliff.
Yeah, sometimes you do a 1-year cliff. No, usually don't do it for founders, but for employees you do 1-year cliff, being like 0 vesting till year 1, but after first year, 1/4 gets vested, and then 2% per month.
Okay.
The reason for that is because a lot of time you have an employee, it doesn't work out.
Yeah.
So you don't want to have too many shareholders which you fired them or they didn't like you.
Can you just expand a little bit for people who don't know what the cliff is and how does that work?
So cliff is that when you give somebody a share, they say, I'm going to give you 500,000 shares, but they are vesting over 4 years with 1-year cliff, which means that as you work with a company and you have right to those 500,000 shares, but you can't put your hand in the cookie jar till 12 months have passed. Then suddenly 1/4 of that amount is vested. So 1,25,000 shares are now vested, so you can now purchase them at the price company issued you the options.
Okay.
Then after every month you work after that, you have 1/48 or 2% additional being vested. So if you leave after 19 months, you didn't get all 500,000 shares. You got that share which is 19 divided by 24, 19 divided by 48.
Okay.
So that's the percent you are entitled to buy.
So you just vest every month and based on how long you stay there.
Yeah, the idea is to basically give people an incentive to say longer they stay, more ownership they have.
Okay. Now, going back to the point where you said you pay the new team member coming as a strong person. Sometimes they come in and say, look, I'm bringing in almost as equivalent value of what you guys are bringing in. You have the 70% or a bigger chunk of the pie. Why should I do that? I want equal rights in there.
It's unusual.
Yeah. Okay.
Because the fact is, the hardest part is putting the company, getting it going. But suppose you're stuck in the conversation. There's no reason you cannot expand this pie.
Yeah.
And you had 2 million shares, you can issue 2 million share option to that person too. If really is the value is justified going forward. Okay. So you could, there's no restriction, you just have to dilute everybody else by issuing additional shares.
Now, today I want to talk about another issue, which is what happens when your co-founder or the team members that you're working with doesn't perform anymore. Mm-hmm. What are your options when you see that your co-founder is not putting as much time anymore, or they just get busy with their life? And so what do you do about that?
It's just the same thing what happens when an employee at a large company doesn't put the right time and it's not involved. The manager has to have a serious sit-down conversation. That, we gave you a big equity in the company because we expected this thing. This is not happening. How do you plan to remedy that? And if you cannot remedy that in 30 days, 40 days, then we may have to take a corrective action. You're still a shareholder of the company, so you will benefit from this. Okay. Because you remember, you still have the right to be a shareholder.
Yeah.
So
it's always important to have a conversation with your co-founder, make sure that all of them are completely aligned.
Yeah.
And if not, then we should definitely look
cut them out.
Cut them out.
Yeah. And this is why investors are very much freaked out by the situation when there are family members involved in starting a business. Because it's very hard to fire your wife. It's hard to fire your brother-in-law. So that's why if there's no family relationship, then you have a lot more freedom to hire and fire people.
Yeah.
But family members starting, it could have very different dynamics.
That's a very interesting point. But at the same time, in India, what happens a lot of times, there is a lot of family businesses, and that's how they start.
Yeah.
So how do they deal with that?
Well, deal with that by upfront setting up these agreements.
Yeah. That
this is meant to be a pure thing, and our family doesn't matter, and chances are if things don't work out, we should be able to separate in a termination. Another way to deal with that is you set up this 1-year contract.
Yeah.
So contract, you're automatically fired after every year, unless the board or some management agrees to renew it.
Yeah.
So it's built in that this person will be terminated officially.
By the way, a good case study on this would be a lot of people would have heard of Zoho.com. The founders are from India, and they were family when they started. Later on, the brothers, they kind of, went their own ways. I don't know exact reason why, but they went their own ways, and Zoho has been doing pretty successful. So that may be something to look for as a case study of what exactly to do with family.